Good evening. I'm Father John Higgins. I'm pastor of Holy Cross Church, and I thank you so much for joining us on this inaugural episode of Catholic Soundview. We're coming to you from Holy Cross Church here on Soundview Avenue in this Classen Point area of the Bronx. This beautiful church was consecrated on October 13th, 1968, at the time of this recording, just over 49 years ago. And we're so happy that you could be with us for this recording. We hope to fulfill what all the recent popes have been asking the church to do, from Pope John Paul II, I should say St. John Paul II, from Pope Benedict, from Pope Francis, who's really become a master of the use of the modern means of communication. His Twitter and Instagram accounts have millions of followers. This is our humble effort to come to you, to share with you the richness that we found in our faith here as we encountered it in the Bronx. In the course of this show, we'd like to interview various and important personalities from our parish life. And with us tonight is Deacon Jamie Bello. He's very well known to the Catholic parishioners of Holy Cross Church because he's been a deacon for 17 years. And even before that, he served in various capacities. In fact, he came just 1 month after this building that we're sitting in was consecrated in October of 1968 and has always found his home here. And it's my joy to welcome you. Deacon Bello, thank you so much for coming to be with us.
Thank you for having me.
I can't really say coming to be with us because this is your home. This is our home.
It's our home, indeed it is.
Tell me about your roots, your background growing up. I think you were born in Manhattan, and then as a young person, you came here.
That's correct. I was born at Mount Sinai Hospital in East Harlem. However, I grew up for my formative years in the South Bronx in the parish of St. Athanasius on Fox Street. My dad did multiple things. He was a cab driver, he was a musician, he worked for the post office, and my mom worked for the telephone company. And they worked very hard to put 5 children through Catholic school. But when the South Bronx was burning in the 70s, and even before that, they felt the need to get out. So in 1967, we found a house here on Beach Avenue, and we moved in November of 1968, just 1 month after this beautiful church was opened. We were still attending Mass at St. Athanasius until my mom kept asking, where is the nearest Catholic church? Lo and behold, when we walked this way, we saw this beautiful church. We walked in and instantly fell in love not only with the church, but with the Franciscan friars who were here at that time.
And then started your involvement in the church? Were you involved right away?
It took a little bit because we were still going to school. So I would say September of 69, we really started our involvement. My brother and I continued at St. Athanasius till Christmas, and then we transferred to Holy Cross School here while in 5th grade in 1968.
Okay.
So immediately we were called upon to become altar servers, and we had teams of 5. The Franciscans would take us to Callicoon, New York each year, trying to coax us into becoming friars. But we got involved as best as we could as young kids in 1968.
Now, I know one of the many aspects of the active life of Holy Cross Church is its youth group. Were you involved in a youth group in the early days?
I was. My wife actually was one of the founding members of the youth group in 1979. There was a need. Holy Cross has had a youth group prior to that time, but it was all sports. Let's go to the gym and play basketball. In 1978, 79, they saw that there was a need for the young people to get actively involved in God. And it started with a retreat. They went off on a retreat to Peekskill, actually. It was St. Francis at that time. It was a convent run by the nuns over there, Franciscan nuns. And they would give us the use of the house for $300 for the weekend. We had to provide our own food, of course, and our own cooks. But they went on retreat. I was not on that first retreat. My wife was there, and youth group was born, because immediately when they came back, they said, this experience can't die. We've got to continue to do something. And at that time, they would meet on Thursday evenings. We haven't stopped since then. The youth group has gone through its ups and downs, but it's continued to meet on a weekly basis for the most part since 1978. I came on board with the youth group in 1980. As one of its adult moderators.
Okay.
I wasn't so much of an adult. I was 19 years old. But we got involved, and that's how I met my wife, actually.
In the parish youth group?
In the parish youth group.
Okay. Now, starting in 1980, you were ordained a deacon 20 years later.
20 years later.
What happened in those 20 years that led you? I guess marriage was one of those things.
Marriage was one of them.
What led you to the diaconate?
It's a long story.
Okay.
I'll give you the Reader's Digest version.
Okay.
I started here, obviously, as an altar server and loved what I did here in the parish as an altar server. Continued through high school, and I was a sophomore at Cardinal Hayes High School. On a dare, someone said to me, "Why don't you go and teach religious ed?" And I said, "What is that?" And they said, CCD. What does that mean? Well, you go teach kids about God. And they said, you get out of school early on Wednesdays. We'll let you out at lunchtime from Hayes to give you an hour to get to Holy Cross. And then you teach the kids, and then you're a block away from your house. I said, I can do that. 40 somewhat years later, I'm still involved with religious ed in the parish. So I started teaching religious ed at 15 years old, and I continued to be an active part of the parish on my own, in spite of the parish youth group. I was one of the first ministers of communion here in the parish, one of the first lectors here in the parish, because the Franciscan friars always pushed for young people to get involved. So I got involved in anything that I could. I continued that for many, many, many years. In 1994, my mother died unexpectedly from an aneurysm. We were very close. That was actually a very difficult year for me and my family. In January of that year, my wife and I were in the earthquake in Los Angeles. My wife was always very active, never afraid of anything, but since that time, she's afraid of heights, she's afraid of the dark, she's afraid of a lot of things. And I guess in many ways, it brought us closer together. But in April of that year, my wife went upstairs to visit her mother. I own a two-family house in the Castle Hill section, and she was coming down after getting a cup of coffee. I was with my daughters at the dentist, and my wife fell down the stairs. It was just a couple of steps, but she broke her hip in the process. And she was very young at the time, so it was unheard of that a simple fall can break the hip. In May of that year, my mother fell down the stairs in her house and broke her ankle. So it's like, what's going on? But in August, there was a fire at my parents' house, just one block away, the same house that I grew up at. My daughters were in that house, and they were stuck in the room. And were it not for a neighbor who saw the smoke coming up from the attic, who broke his way into the house, because my father's trying to grab my daughters, trying to grab my mother and get her out of the house. But a neighbor came in and actually helped carry my mother out the house. She couldn't walk, and got my kids out of the room. That was a scary experience. My parents came to live with me in my house for a short term while they were rebuilding her house, and then for a short term in my sister's home. In October, they finally finished the construction in the house, and my parents were getting ready to move back in. It was a Saturday morning. I was on my way here to religious ed, and I always passed by my parents' house for a cup of coffee to say hi. That morning, I was running late for some reason, and I went to see Mom and Dad, and Mom says to me, "Come upstairs. My bedroom is finally ready. I have the curtains up and everything else. Come on up and look. It's beautiful." And I said to her, "Mom, I can't. I'm running late. I have to go. I'll come back afterwards to see you." She went with my sister and my daughters to the Bronx Zoo that day, and that afternoon at 5:03, she passed away. She was in the car with my sister. They were coming back from the Bronx Zoo, and they were parked in Parkchester. My sister was getting some products, and she called me and said, "Jaime, come quickly. There's something wrong with Mom. She's dizzy. I just called the ambulance." I jumped in my car. I put the police siren on. I put the lights on, and I rushed over there. We rushed her to the hospital, and the doctor came out and said, "I'm sorry, we did everything we could, and she died." It was a blow to me. It was a blow to my faith. I had no desire to want to live. And I remember a Franciscan friar who ultimately became my spiritual director, Father Ted Sapio, God rest his soul. But he showed up at Jacoby Hospital, and the family, I in particular, are waiting for some words of wisdom, some words of sorrow, and he just simply started to cry with us. And he said, "There's nothing I can say. We loved her too." And he said, "All I can do right now is be here with my family and embrace you." And he just simply cried. Then he said to me, "Never lose hope in the resurrection." And that stayed with me forever. Notwithstanding that, I still struggled with my faith. God, how could you take my mother away at this time? Mom and I were very, very close. And I was working, and at that time, I put my gun to my head 5 times. I didn't want to live anymore without my mother. And one day when I finally got the courage to pull the trigger, I was in my bedroom, and my grandson, who was 2 years old at the time, walked into the bedroom and said, "Grandpa, you always look so sad. I love you." And he just jumped into the bed with me. And he said, "I'm just going to stay here and watch TV with you." And he put his head on my chest. And I cried a little bit, and I said, "I have to live for this child." He's 25 years old now. The kid is my heart. The kid is my life. He often says to me that I'm his best friend. We enjoy a wonderful relationship. But from that time on, I said, I've got to do more to help others. And I guess that was the start of my desire to want to investigate the diaconate. Certainly many, many years before that, many priests had asked me, "Have you considered the diaconate?" I was too young. In 1984, actually, I was approached by Father Leonard Parati, who was pastor here. And he says, "Jaime, why don't you consider becoming a deacon?" And I said, "I'm too young." Deacon Luis Fontanes was here at the parish at the time, and he was a moving force, and he would constantly ask me, "You got to do it, you got to do it." But it had to be not in my time, not in his time, it had to be in God's time. And when I thought about taking my own life, God intervened through my grandson, and he said to me, "It's time." And I went in, and for the 4 years I was in formation at St. Joseph's Seminary, I said, I'm just going in to check it out. I want to see what it's all about. After the first year, well, I survived the first year. Let's look at the second year. By the time it was all said was done, on June 3rd of 2000, I was the first person that Cardinal Egan ordained as a permanent deacon in the Archdiocese of New York.
Wow. And how's it been since then? Your life changed dramatically from that day.
My life changed.
From a private to a public figure in the church.
Indeed, it did. I had worked in law enforcement for 17 years. I had to retire in 2003 after an accident. And I guess as a law enforcement officer, I didn't always make the right decisions and do the right things. So in 2000, I was still working, and when I was ordained, it really did change my life. I was a drug treatment specialist and a supervisor. So most of the offenders that I dealt with as a United States probation and parole officer were drug-affected offenders. My twin brother also happened to be drug-affected, which caused my interest in that field. And there was a calling there in helping others. So I saw my job and my ministry as a deacon as a way to impact the lives of others. My daughters would constantly make fun of me. "There goes Daddy playing dress up again," when I would dress up for Mass or benediction, because my family has always been intimately involved in my ministry. And but my greatest joy in my diaconate ministry is not playing the dress up, as they say, but rolling up my sleeves and getting in the trenches. And I've spent many, many, many years working with the parish youth group. I have a passion for young people and kids. My mantra has always been, if I can save the life of one kid or one person, or impact their lives, or change the direction of their lives, then I've done my job. And I think because of all the bad I've done in the past, I'm working real hard to gain entry into heaven.
Now, I would like to hear, or allow our viewers to hear a little bit about what you do as a deacon and have done in these 17 years. Maybe just to tell a little bit about this parish. This is our inaugural episode of Catholic Soundview. I'm brand new here. Maybe good, if a visitor comes or if someone's watching this on another side of the country, what is this community like, which you serve as a permanent deacon?
This community is the best community I've ever been involved in. It's an eclectic community. When I first moved in '68, it was predominantly Italians and Irish, and the Puerto Ricans from the South Bronx were starting to migrate into the area. My parents bought their home for $28,000, unheard of in this day, and we were migrating in. So the cultures were expanding greatly at the time. But we've assimilated really, really well. And today we have many, many different cultures in this parish. And people have a desire to want to do much. They just want to be asked. So it's about coming up with a plan and asking them, and not from the pulpit. It's engaging with them one-on-one. They fill my life more than I fill their lives. I think I've done more baptisms in this parish than any priest that's ever come through the doors here. I've done, in 17 years, over 2,000 baptisms.
Wow.
I've done over 230 weddings. The numbers of wake services that I've done for the parish go far beyond those numbers. And I will never, ever, ever deny anyone prayers. It brings me closer to God, and I hope that I'm bringing them closer to God as well.
So you mentioned before you're involved in religious education. Or many of our viewers would know that you're the coordinator of religious education or director of religious education. What else do you do besides help our public school children learn about their faith?
Here in the parish, my office, thankfully, is in the school building. We have a phenomenal principal in Mr. Ernie Zalamea, and when he's not around, my obligation is to be here to cover the school for him. So we work hand in hand, not only for the public school students, but for all the kids in the parish of Holy Cross. I've been director of religious ed here for 10 years. After I retired, I was out of commission for 3 years because I am permanently disabled. I look a lot better than what I actually am. I take extensive medicines to keep me going. But it's the kids and the parish that keep me going. And in religious ed, just bringing the kids and seeing the joy in their face when they're receiving the Eucharist or celebrating their confirmation just brings great joy to me. And I think I'm affecting their lives, as well as the children in the school. I'm also the director of deacons for the Archdiocese of New York.
Yeah, tell us about that. So you're not just our deacon, but you're the deacon for the Archdiocese.
That's a challenge.
What are your duties?
Yeah, I'm responsible for oversight of all of the deacons, and it's a vast archdiocese. We go from Staten Island, New York City, the Bronx, all the way up north, just south of Albany. And I'm responsible for their assignments. If they get into trouble, I have to set them straight. I guess that's when the cop in me comes out. Okay. But sort of be a support for them. And it's very, very important to be with my brother deacons, to work and bring about the journey for the people of God to be able to enter into the kingdom of heaven. It's a lot of work, but it's what keeps me going every single day.
I know in the understanding of the church's vision of diaconal ministry, and you said it before, you witness weddings. You said you've done 230 at least, over 2,000 baptisms, which is extraordinary. And you also preach as well.
I do.
Now, do all permanent deacons have the faculties to preach?
Upon ordination, the permanent deacons have the faculties to preach at weekday masses, at funerals, at wakes, at weddings. After a year of internship, they can petition through my office and subsequently through the Vicar General to receive preaching faculties to be able to preach at the Sunday Mass. Because we want them to focus in that first year of ordination on servant ministry. Deacons are not many priests, and they should never aspire to be that. They're servants. We emulate Jesus Christ as Christ the servant. So it's always about rolling up our sleeves and getting in the trenches rather than, as my daughters would say, playing dress up. So my greatest joy is, yes, baptisms and everything else, but getting in the trenches and working with the people in need.
Now, you mentioned your daughters. Of course, you mentioned your wife. And you said that your whole family's been involved in ministry. Tell us a little about how your family is involved in ministry.
My wife, Jane, is the RCIA coordinator here in the parish and has been probably for 8 years.
What is RCIA for maybe our viewers who may not know?
RCIA is the rite of Christian initiation for adults. For those folks who have never been baptized that wish to be baptized in the Catholic faith, or those who wish to convert to the Catholic faith, RCIA handles that. And then we have those who were baptized but have not finished their sacraments of initiation. So we help them in that process so they can be confirmed throughout that year. My daughters are intimately involved with the youth choir in the parish. They're not so young anymore, and they'll kill me if they see this. But they're also involved with the youth group and have been for many, many, many years. My middle daughter, Mila, started coming into the youth group when she was in my wife's stomach and has not stopped. She was one of the youngest persons to ever be part of our youth group as an infant and then growing up.
Yeah. So I know them personally, and they do wonderful work as singing in the choir and through the RCIA and to our extraordinary youth ministry, which continues now with the great help. What do you see as going forward, the biggest challenges for Catholic Soundview and from where we are now or where you feel the Lord is calling us to be?
I think the Lord is calling us to bring people back home. One of the greatest things of this church, we have the statue back there of the resurrected Christ. That statue was always up in front up till about 10 years ago. And when I walk into this church, even when I was a youngster, in my darkest times, I would always hear Christ telling me, Jaime, welcome home. I love you. Doesn't matter what I had done wrong, my God was welcoming me home. And I think we have an obligation to welcome others, sometimes by a simple invitation. Come home. And when they come here, to be welcome them and offer them an opportunity to get closer to God. It's a great, great challenge, but I think it's one that we can certainly work on.
Yeah. If I could encourage you to be more specific, you have your hand in a lot of things here. We have youth ministry here that takes care of teenagers from age 13 through 17. You also take care of the pre-baptismal ministry largely. If there's couples watching this who have yet to baptize their child, what would you say to them?
Come home, bring your kids home, and I don't do it alone. We have wonderful, wonderful ministers here. I have my hands in a lot of things, but I don't run a lot of things. Were it not for the parishioners who are interested in getting engaged and being active in different ministries, this parish would fall. It's the parishioners who make this parish so strong. I'm just a humble person trying to do my little bit. As I often tell people, I know a little bit about a little bit. And if we all do a little bit, we can accomplish a lot.
You know, our viewers won't know that we're actually recording this episode on the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. And one of the things that as soon as I came here, I realized that the Franciscan roots run deep in this parish. They were here for 87 years. They were here. You mentioned many of the friars as you came. Would you describe your own spirituality as a Franciscan spirituality?
Absolutely.
In what sense is that?
Without a doubt. St. Francis heard the voice of God saying, Francis, rebuild my church. And it's not the physical church. It's the spirituality of the church, bringing people back home to God. And that has always been one of my greatest things. Rebuild the church by first rebuilding myself. I can't make an effect on anybody else's life unless I first affect my life. Then I just have to be opening and welcoming. Now, certainly I have my foibles. As we say in Spanish, no tengo pelo en la lengua. Sometimes I have no filters, and that's unfortunate. Sometimes I forget that I'm a deacon and the cop in me comes out and I say things that perhaps ought not to be said in that manner. And I have to recognize that I'm a sinner as well. And sometimes I have to be humble enough to say, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Not so much in what I said, but perhaps in how I said it. Because, I can hurt someone in a fist fight, or in a gunfight, or in a knife fight. But the words that come out of my mouth can probably do more damage than any weapon anybody can hold. So I have to look for the peace that St. Francis implores all of us to have.
Deacon, I'm just brand new here. I just have 3 months at Holy Cross Church. Maybe I could turn the table on you a little bit. I'm the fourth pastor in just a matter of 3.5 years here. What advice would you give to a new pastor of Holy Cross Church if he's supposed to fill what you see the ministry of the church is to say welcome? What advice would you give to a new pastor at Holy Cross Church just coming in?
We are a resilient community. We love the Lord. We love our parish. And the only advice I can give you is to continue to do what you're doing now. The pastoral work that you've initiated since you've been here has been phenomenal. I've not seen in a long time a priest spend a half hour, 45 minutes after Mass outside with his parishioners. You go out and you're with the kids, you're with the community. You go to the wake services, you invite them to partake in the sacrament of confession. And as I said, sometimes people just want to be asked, and you do it in a simple, humble way.
No, I wasn't fishing for compliments, Deacon.
These are not compliments. These are facts. You're asking for recommendations. The recommendation is to continue to do what you've been doing. It may not be easy, but we're a community that will support you in what you do. God has sent you here by means of the Cardinal. The Cardinal has blessed us with your presence, and we've been blessed with many, many presents. We've had, 3 pastors in the last 4 years, and they've all been wonderful in their own way, and this is by no way a comparison. But sometimes change is good, not only for me, but for the parish as well. It helps us to grow.
Well, thank you most kindly, and I can return by saying that to our viewers that I look to our deacon constantly for advice, and our deacon would know that a couple times a week I said, here's all my ideas that I have to bounce off you, and I'm really grateful for the help. One last question before we close out, Deacon. We have extraordinary parishioners here, somewhere between 700 and 1,000 people who come on our masses on the weekends. But there may be some who feel a call towards the permanent diaconate. Part of your ministry is to continue on and be a leader for the deacons. If there's a young man here, or maybe not so young man, who feels perhaps God is calling him, what words would you say to him?
Continue to follow the call. Listen, be still, know that he's God, and don't say no right away. Have your heart open. As I often say to people who have gone through divorces and annulments, don't close your heart to love. And the same thing goes true for those who might be interested in the priesthood. Sometimes we just need to ask, prod. Others we have to push because they're interested, and then we have to let go. But give them the opportunity to know that God is present in our lives, and there are many, many ways to serve God. And one way is through the diaconate, another way is through the priesthood, and there are many, many other ways to serve the people of God in the Catholic Church.
Thank you so much, Deacon. I'm deeply grateful for you for opening your heart and sharing these stories that are new to me even. And to our viewers, I want to express my gratitude to you for coming to be with us. If you see us here in Catholic Soundview, why don't after Mass you come to us? Our Mass schedule is Saturday evenings at 5:30, and then on Sunday morning it's 8:30 a.m., 10:30 a.m. in Spanish, and 12:30 p.m. And if you do, why don't you tap me or tap Deacon Bello on the shoulder and say, you saw us on Catholic Soundview. Grateful for your being with us tonight. God bless you and your families.